The inconsistent nature of evaluations for 2025's NFL draft quarterback class is exactly why the New Orleans Saints should avoid it at all costs. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints, as the Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst with WWL TV. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, it's Mock Draft Monday, so we're doing our post-Senior Bowl Kellen Moore assumed as the head coach, we'll say, mock draft here for you. We'll take a look at some late additions that bring a lot of value, whether special teams or important depth on that offensive line. The tight end class that the New Orleans Saints just should not miss out on, again. We've seen this before. And we're going to take a look at why the New Orleans Saints should still consider avoiding a first-round quarterback. It just doesn't seem worth it in this year's draft class. I'll tell you why, including a popular name, an Ole Miss quarterback, Jaxson Dart. We got all that and much more coming up for you on today's episode. So whether it's your first time or your next time, we thank you very much for making us your first listen and for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs, who want to help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free today at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. The New Orleans Saints should continue forging ahead without really worrying about this year's NFL draft class when it comes to the quarterbacks. There's been a lot of conversation around the New Orleans Saints, as well as other teams in the middle of the first round, maybe taking a third quarterback, seeing somebody sneak up a la Bo Nix from last year. But this draft class is feeling a little bit more like Malik Willis and Matt Corral and guys like Sam Howell and others that were assumed to be folks that were going to fall a little bit later in the draft, and then all of a sudden picked up steam late in the process, only to still fall later on in the draft. It feels very much like this is on the way for guys like Jaxson Dart, Jalen Milroe, and others. Ole Miss quarterback Jaxson Dart is one of the most popular names when it comes to a third quarterback that could potentially sneak into the first round. There's been some buzz around him that has been called by some experts, quote unquote, misguided, about him potentially going in the middle of the first round. I want to give Corey Kinnan a big shout out because he did a great service to a lot of folks over at draftondraft.football, where he went out and spoke with some of the scouts over at the Senior Bowl, some of the team scouts that were looking at some of the players that were participating at the Senior Bowl, things like that. And what you'll notice is that for a lot of these guys that are saying that, hey, watch for Jaxson Dart, he could potentially sneak into the middle of the first round, they're the big media names, right? They're the reporters, they're the insiders, they're those things. But if you go and look at the draft analysts that watch the tape, that watch the film, that review these players, and you listen to what the scouts are saying behind the scenes, there's a clear disconnect in terms of the evaluation of Jaxson Dart. And that's not just Jaxson Dart. We've seen that with Jalen Milroe. We've seen that with other quarterbacks as well, Kyle McCord and others, which if there's any quarterback to maybe roll the dice on later on in the draft, maybe it's Kyle McCord, who led the nation in passing yards last year. But listen to some of the things that some of these scouts are saying. An NFC South scout saying nowhere near the first two rounds for us. An AFC scout saying, basically giving what Corey described as a not safe for work answer when he was giving his opinion on Jaxson Dart. An NFC South scout expressing an early day 3 grade, and then another NFC scout indicating that they had an even lower grade than that on Jaxson Dart. The evaluation is all over the place, and some of the inconsistencies of the evaluation come from where the evaluation is coming from, right? The folks that are media that are saying, hey, they're the ones that are saying, hey, this guy could go in the middle of the first round. But the guys that are actually scouting the players are like, yeah, it might be day 3, might not really isn't scratching round 1. And then other experts, other reporters, analysts, experts are calling the first round buzz misguided as well. So I would avoid this class if I was the New Orleans Saints when it came to quarterback. If you want to roll the dice on Jaxson Dart because he's there for you in the third round, sure, great. Top of day 4, sure, fine. Want to do that? Top of day 4, top of day 3, round 4, my apologies, sure, do that. But you also have guys like Kyle McCord and others that you can roll the dice on as well. So for me, it's going to be a no for me, dog, when it comes down to taking a quarterback in the first round, because there are other things that you can do in that first round that have a major benefit for you. You can go after a running back like Ashton Jeanty or potentially a Teteroa McMillan, the big wide receiver out of Arizona who may fall, who might not fall, who cares? But you could go after one of those big playmakers that can do that. And James Pierce Jr., the prolific edge rusher coming out of Tennessee, or others. So when I start this mock draft off, I'm not going quarterback here to start. We'll explore that a little bit later, but I'm thinking that the quarterback stuff is probably more so like pick 40, pick 71, more than it is pick 9. So in this mock draft, I'm actually going to go at pick 9 with Will Johnson, the cornerback out of Michigan. At pick 40 in the second round, I'm going Omarion Hampton, the running back out of North Carolina. And then at pick 71 in the third round, Jayden Higgins is who I'm taking, the wide receiver out of Iowa State. Those 3 selections for me are really hard to pass up on for any other quarterback in this class that aren't the top 2 quarterbacks. And some conversation is still to be had about those top 2 quarterbacks. But when I can grab a corner at 6'1", 190 plus pounds, 200 plus pounds, that can come in and be a ball hawk, that can come in and be a number 1 corner after the team traded away its number 1 corner last year, and give yourself the opportunity to put players and corners back on islands again in an NFL defense, press coverage, all those other things. You get all that physicality back that allows you to have a really aggressive and attacking defense. I think that's going to be necessary if we're assuming that Kellen Moore's offense is going to be the offense here in New Orleans. When it comes to Omarion Hampton, you need another runner. And Omarion Hampton might be a little bit more of a gap scheme runner, but he can run some of the inside zone stuff. And so getting another running back, whether it's Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina, whether it's Dylan Sampson up out of Tennessee, whether it's Cam Scatteroo out of Arizona State, this is a ridiculously talented running back class. You can grab a Quinshon Judkins later on in the draft out of Ohio State and be able to get a guy that's going to go out there and start for you week 1 alongside Alvin Kamara, right? Not actually start for you, but be a heavy rotation with your starter in Alvin Kamara. But Omarion Hampton is another guy that is a potential second, first-round running back behind Ashton Jeanty. And so you want the run game. You've seen that from Kellen Moore's offense, and a guy like Omarion Hampton, who's a bit more of a bulky, in-between-the-tackles runner, can complement an Alvin Kamara. And then you can go and find your next Alvin Kamara at a later time, unless you feel like you can get somebody that can do both. Then you go and get somebody that can do both. But I love Omarion Hampton here at pick 40 because we don't know. Is he going to be into the first round like a Clyde Edwards-Helaire? Is he going to sneak up in the first round the way that Jahmyr Gibbs did? Or is he going to be a second round guy like you see with most running backs? In any case, I'm going with him in the second round here. And then to wrap up our first 3 picks, we're going to do 3 picks here over the 9 selections. I went with Jayden Higgins, the big-bodied wide receiver out of Ohio State, 6'3", 200 plus pounds. Gives you the physical nature that you want out of a wide receiver. Showed off at the Senior Bowl. He's one of those guys that I think is a good Senior Bowl fit for New Orleans. And you know how much the Saints love their Senior Bowl guys. Came in with over 1,000 receiving yards last season. Just able to go up there and make big plays, make contested catches, be a middle of the field threat. All the things that you need to be able to complement a Chris Olave and a Rashid Shaheed. Coming up next, I want to continue to complement Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed and now Jayden Higgins by going out and getting a big-bodied tight end that can do a little bit of everything. We're going to get that next as we continue on with this Mock Draft Monday episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs, a place that wants to help you find the quality candidates you want to talk to faster and put them in position to be your next employees, because you know your company, especially if you're a small business owner, is only going to be as successful as the hires that you make. That's why small business owners absolutely love LinkedIn Jobs. 72% of small business owners say that LinkedIn Jobs got them a quality, high quality hire, not a high quality candidate, not a warm body that was able to do the job, a high quality candidate. If you're a small business owner, you know that work doesn't end when you clock out at 5. So when you clock out, let LinkedIn clock in and do the job search for you, making sure that your job, which is a desirable one, gets in front of the eyes of those that are looking for exactly what you have to offer. Go and check them out today. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, family, if there is a draft class position-wise that the New Orleans Saints can simply not miss out on here in 2025, it is, amongst the running back room, or in addition to the running back room, is the tight end spot. The Saints have some talented tight ends. I don't know if Juwan Johnson's going to be back. He's on an expiring deal. We'll see what happens when the new head coach comes in. Foster Morrow is a guy that can fit in just about any system. I expect that he'll be around. We'll see what the development of guys like Dallin Holker and Michael Jacobson and others, Trayton Welsh, ends up being going into the next year. Who hangs around, who sticks around, all that. In any case, the New Orleans Saints should take a swing in this tight end class. We've talked about this before, right? A couple years ago, the tight end class was really, really good. And we were like, oh, the Saints got to take a tight end, got to take a tight end, got to take a tight end. That particular year didn't happen. But this year, this season, in almost every round, there's a tight end worth taking around where the Saints are drafting. So now we're looking at the second, third round pick. And just as a reminder, in terms of how we started off here, Will Johnson to start us off, the cornerback out of Michigan. Omarion Hampton, the running back out of North Carolina. Jayden Higgins, the big-bodied wide receiver out of Iowa State. For our next three selections, we're going tight end at 93, the second pick of the third round, with Elijah Arroyo, the fantastic Miami tight end who was a big-time Senior Bowl standout. We'll dive into that after that. Edge and the defensive line. So we're going Ole Miss edge rusher Jared Ivey, as well as defensive tackle out of Maryland, Jordan Phillips. So let's start off with Elijah Arroyo here. Elijah Arroyo came in to the Senior Bowl as a guy that was kind of on a lot of radars, don't get me wrong, but not as much as the other tight ends in this class that you've heard of, like Gunnar Helm and Harold Fannin Jr., and of course Tyler Warren out of Penn State, all that. But Arroyo really got an extra opportunity when Texas tight end Gunnar Helm didn't participate in the Senior Bowl. It kind of moved Arroyo up a little bit to where he got more opportunities. And so when that happened, the 6'4", 251-pound wide receiver / tight end, I mean, he's kind of a little bit of a hybrid, but you're going to play him at tight end with a remarkable 81-inch wingspan, ends up making some huge plays all throughout the Senior Bowl, whether it was in practice or whatever it might be. He was somebody that absolutely stood out and made a lot of noise for himself. Now, here's the deal. You're going to hear a lot of things like, oh, this player made a lot of money. This player put themselves in position. This player put themselves on the map and all this stuff. Scouts have been watching these guys for years. But here's what a performance like what Elijah Arroyo during the Senior Bowl weekend does. It makes you go back to his tape at college. You see him at the Senior Bowl, and then you go, this guy might not have been on my radar because he only had 35 receptions for 590 receiving yards. Not a humongously productive season, especially with Cam Ward at quarterback. But because Cam Ward was playing at quarterback for Miami, you have a lot of guys that go and they watch the tape, they watch Cam Ward, they watch Cam Ward, they watch Cam Ward, then they go to the Senior Bowl, they see this guy out of the University of Miami, and they were like, wait a minute, that's the number 8 guy that I see all the time when I'm watching the Cam Ward tape. So let me go back to the tape and check this guy out. Then all of a sudden you realize that he averaged 16.9 yards per catch in 2024. You realize that he had 7 receiving touchdowns last year in 2024. And then all of a sudden he starts jumping off of the tape because you're starting to see a little bit of the production. So that's where the value of the Senior Bowl really comes in, is to see performances like that throughout the Senior Bowl week and the practices and all that, and then be able to have something to go back to because you're going to go back to his tape. So that puts somebody like Elijah Arroyo right back on the radars of everybody, and I think that is going to have a big impact on where things stand for him. So him as a late third round pick at this point, considered an absolute steal. Let's go to the fourth round pick, 111, especially if you want like that all around line tight end, but that's also a big bodied pass catcher and can go out there and do the athletic stuff as well. That's where a guy like Elijah Arroyo fits in. Just if you're looking for like a tight end archetype, like an Isaiah Oliver type in that case, right? That kind of guy, Brevin Jordan type in that case. Let's go next to pick Round 4, pick 111, Jared Ivey, the 6'5"-ish, 280 plus pound defensive end. Georgia native, spent his collegiate time with Ole Miss. 23 solo tackles last year, forced 2 fumbles, 7 sacks last season as well. Had 5.5 sacks the season before that. So you just saw him kind of get better and better and better. From a sack perspective, 1.5 in 2021, 3.5 in 2022, 5.5 in 2023, 7 in 2024. It's the trajectory that you want to see as things continue to move forward for a guy like that. Same thing with tackles. You saw the numbers tick up each year, except for the fact in solo tackles. When it came to total tackles, he had 42 this year, 46 the year before that. But I think that's going to be okay. He also, because of that size, got 3 passes defense last year as well, just getting his hands up in the passing lane and all that kind of stuff. You're going to hear me wax philosophic all draft season about how much I love the play of Princely Umanmielen. But on the other side of him is a really good guy wearing number 15 in the defensive end, Jared Ivey, who also has an expansive set of pass rush moves, is tenacious, has gone up against the SEC talent on offensive lines at tackle and all those other things. So I really, really, really like what you can get out of a Jared Ivey at this point. The thing that's really cool to remember about this draft class is that actually defensive line stuff, pretty good in terms of depth when it comes to these positions. And so if you don't leap for this position early, edge rusher, defensive tackle, whatever it might be, you're not in a situation to where you're going to be left behind. There's still talented players you can grab a little bit later on in the draft. So I really like a guy like Jared Ivey that could potentially help you get there at the top of day 3. Let's go to the next selection in round 4. And I went with Maryland defensive tackle Jordan Phillips. There's a lot of defensive tackles that I like in this class, and you can go up to the top of the draft with guys like Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, both those guys coming out of Michigan. You can go into day 2 with guys like Deion Walker out of Kentucky, the 6'7" behemoth of a human being. You can go towards the later portions of the draft with like a Howard Cross III out of Notre Dame. There's a lot of good selections here, and there's a lot of guys in between. Jordan Phillips is one of the guys that's in between that I really like in day 3, early on in day 3. Not a single career sack. I'm just going to tell you that now, but I'm also going to tell you this. We don't care. We do not care because that's not Jordan Phillips' game. Now, Jordan Phillips is more athletic than given credit. I don't want to say raised his stock, but he met his stock with media where it probably already was with teams during the Shrine Bowl, where he performed incredibly well. You saw the athleticism, but at 320 pounds, this guy's a run plugger in the NFL, and he can play that nose tackle. He can move over to one tackle, all those other things. So if you let Brian Brzee do the interior pass rush, you're going to need a guy that's going to be able to change the numbers on the interior. We talk about that all the time. Jordan Phillips is a guy that can change the numbers on the interior. He's a Malcolm Brown type. Remember Malcolm Brown when he was here with the New Orleans Saints a few years ago and really, really helped out that run defense, even though he wasn't often getting to the quarterback? There you go. That's Jordan Phillips. And I think that is a fantastic mold and fit for New Orleans. I know everything on the defensive line is spiced up when you start talking about how many sacks they got, but Jordan Phillips isn't that guy, nor does he need to be that guy. Excellent first and second down defensive tackle, and then you can rotate your pass rushers in on those obvious passing downs because you got there because you were finally able to stop the run. That's where Jordan Phillips helps you out. Coming up next, we're going to take a look at some of the late round additions that bring immediate value, including a linebacker that can develop into a starter and immediately contribute on special teams. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks, the easiest and most fun way to play daily fantasy sports. The Super Bowl is on the way, the big game, and you already know it's going to be exciting, but you can make it even more exciting with our friends over at Prize Picks because you can get in on the big game weekend winnings with a lot of fun stuff. Now, here's how Prize Picks works. They give you a projection for players that are going to be partaking in the game. It's not limited to football. You can go basketball, college football, whatever it is that you're looking for. They're going to give you a stat projection, like passing yards. And all you're going to do is choose more or less. That's it. Get that right on 2 to 6 players. You get up to 1,000 times your money back. And right now, which is super dope, they're actually giving you a bit of a free square right now because Patrick Mahomes, Kansas City Chiefs quarterback, just needs to throw for 1 yard in the big game, and all of a sudden you've got a win, pair that with one more win, and you're already cashing out. So download the app today and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL. You're going to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 deposit. That's promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup at PrizePicks. Run your game. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. If you're looking for tickets for your next big event, or even maybe trying to grab some last minute tickets to the big game, well, Game Time's definitely the place to go. Here's why. They've got Game Time Picks. It's one of my favorite features on Game Time. It makes it easier because you ain't got to kind of cycle through all the different ticket offers. See, Game Time Picks just kind of curates the best offers for you so you don't have to spend your time going through endless ticket listings to find what it is that you want. That's what I like about Game Time. They simplify the experience for the user and they take all of the guesswork out. They make it really transparent. You can check out all of their deals, their sales and stuff like that. Yeah, but you can also see the view from your seats before you buy the tickets. You can toggle on all-in pricing so you're not taken by surprise by any fees by the time you get there. If you're ready to make your next event even better, do it by downloading the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Get $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL, $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. We might have gone defense early, but we focused a lot on offense here in the middle of the draft, grabbing a running back, grabbing a wide receiver, grabbing a tight end. We've kind of gone back to focusing on the defense here, and there are some of those late round defensive gets that could bring some good value for the New Orleans Saints, who need a little bit of a reshape. And look, that reshape is on the way, especially when it comes to the linebacker room, with a new linebacker coach inbound for the New Orleans Saints and a new defensive system inbound for the New Orleans Saints. So I wanted to take a look at some of the guys who might be able to help the New Orleans Saints where things might be changing, especially in the late rounds. So let's take a look at that. In round 6, pick 186, I went with Demetrius Knight Jr., the linebacker out of South Carolina, another very good Senior Bowl player who had a really strong Senior Bowl. At pick 249, our first of the 7th round picks, I went with the center out of Purdue, Gus Hartwig. The New Orleans Saints need a backup center, period. And then at pick 254 in the 7th round, I wrapped up with going with Oluwafemi Oladejo, who was the linebacker slash edge rusher from UCLA. So we'll get to Oluwafemi here in just a moment, but I want to start off with Demetrius Knight Jr., the linebacker out of South Carolina. He's a little bit undersized in terms of height at 6'1", but he clocks in at 246 pounds. So measures him with really good bulk, but that's okay. I think you'll take that for his play style, because I think he's going to be more of an off-ball guy in the league and everything like that. He had 82 total tackles last year, so he's somebody that gets in on those tackles, 96 the year before that. So he is absolutely somebody that's going to get mixy, get involved in the running game, all those other things. 2 sacks last year, 1.5 sacks the year before that, but an interception last year and 3 interceptions the year before that. Shows you there's a little bit of this kind of will coverage drop back linebacker in his play as well. And when I say that it's in his play, I don't mean that the way that the Saints might have met it with, Zach Bond back in the day, where it's like, yeah, we think he could be an off-ball linebacker, but like this is your quintessential off-ball linebacker, right? And a guy like Demetrius Knight. No touchdowns allowed in coverage, was targeted 16 times, but only allowed about a 69.6 completion percentage. Typically for linebackers, you're talking about like an 80% plus type of completion percentage. So really nice there. And then had his 1 interception with no touchdowns allowed, and just a 61.7 passer rating allowed when targeted as well. So really, really like Demetrius Knight, especially at that point in the draft. We'll see what ends up happening with him. His draft stock is kind of all over the place. I think PFF has him as like the 32 ranked player, and then PFN has him as like the 100 something ranked player. So what his stock is going to be by the time that we get around to it is fine. But like archetype wise, this is the type of linebacker that you'd like to add to your systems, whether you're drafting him in the 2nd round, or whether you're drafting a player like him at the end of the draft and banking on some of those traits. It's the archetype that matters most. When it comes to Hartwig, who I took to start off the 7th round, the offensive lineman the center out of Purdue, I'm still on this thing, right? I'm still on this idea that the Saints desperately need to make sure that they have a legitimate backup center ready to go. And it's not because I think that Eric McCoy is like a concern or anything like that, but like when there's an injury, you want as little of a drop off as possible. It's hard to not have a drop off at center when you don't have somebody that's focused on playing center for you, and you're having to go to this guy that's also playing guard and that guy that's also playing guard, or you're signing somebody off the street and all those other things. Saints got in that situation again last year. They had to go out and they had to sign Connor McGovern midseason and all that. Or just have somebody developed and ready to go. And so for me, Gus Hartwig could be a guy to take a look at late in the draft. 679 snaps played last season. 395 of those were pass blocking snaps. Allowed 2 sacks last year, 2 hits, whatever. Big deal. Who cares? Did a fantastic job as a pass blocker. Was really good in those situations too, as a true pass sets. So when we talk about true pass blocking sets, we mean passing snaps that don't include play action, that don't include a rollout, that don't include a screen, things like that. You're looking at a developmental prospect, right? We're talking about a 7th round pick. We're not talking about somebody that's going to come in and like challenge anybody for a job or whatever. But I think starting to take some swings here late in the draft on the offensive line just made a lot of sense for where this draft had gone so far, because we didn't get to invest in the offensive line early. I think it's going to be best for the Saints to invest in the offensive line through free agency as opposed to waiting for the draft, and then maybe draft one kind of like developmental guy. And then if you can find a guy that makes sense early, then great. But then you're not pressured to do that because you've handled the situation in free agency. I think that's the way the New Orleans Saints should go for it. Lastly, edge rusher. Oluwafemi Oladejo out of UCLA came in the Senior Bowl at 6'2", almost 6'3". He was right there, 6'2" and 3/4. 6'2" and 3/4. 261 pounds. So not as tall as the Saints' typical edge rusher. Prototype. But I don't know if that's what the Saints are going to want either. And so if you're looking for somebody that can bring you some speed around the edge, that can also still hold up against the run despite his 6'2" size, and you want that person late, Oluwafemi Oladejo. I really like this guy. I liked watching him a lot at the Senior Bowl. He was a guy that wasn't on my radar before the Senior Bowl and then was hard to miss while at the Senior Bowl. I mean, I did an episode all about how like the defensive line was kind of dominating and stuff like that. And Oladejo was a part of that. 4.5 sacks last season. Came through as well at 57 total tackles. Run stop rate from PFF of 9.3. So you can see a little bit of like the all-aroundness in his game, and he's solid, very disciplined against the run too. So grab him if you switch to a 3-4, makes a lot of sense as a stand-up guy, but otherwise contributes just like Demetrius Knight immediately in special teams. And then if he develops over time, then you're in a really good place. So there you go. There's our mock draft. Will Johnson, the first, Omarion Hampton in the second, Jayden Higgins, the wide receiver of Iowa State, in the third, along with Elijah Arroyo, the tight end out of Miami. We had Jared Ivey and Jordan Phillips to help bolster the defensive line, Demetrius Knight, Gus Hartwig, and Oluwafemi Oladejo, it's Dejo, not Dejo. Oladejo coming out of UCLA, another linebacker / edge rusher that can help you out. So there you go. And no quarterback, because I still think that it's not worth it for New Orleans in this draft class, unless they fall in love. It only takes one. It only takes one team to fall in love with a quarterback, and then all of a sudden that quarterback is picked at number 12 or picked at number 9 in this case. All right, there you go. Mock draft. I want to do more quarterback talk tomorrow. Dive into like what it would look like if you did draft Jaxson Dart at 9, if you did draft Jaxson Dart at 40, and all that kind of stuff. So I want to do more of that in tomorrow's episode. So make sure you come through for that. And of course, we'll continue to keep up to date with the latest on the New Orleans Saints. We appreciate you very much as always, making us your first listen of the day. Go and check out Locked NFL for your second listen. And we appreciate you as always, making us party day part of your routine for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Learn how the family's doing, how you living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.